Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. I'm Laura Cellier, and these are the headlines. US envoy Steve Witkoff heads to Israel as phase one of the Trump ceasefire plan remains stalled. Iran's water crisis. The president warns Tehran may have to be evacuated if it doesn't rain soon. And Israel's President Herzog to visit Zambia and the DRC as the Jewish state strengthens ties with Africa. First, after an 11-year wait, the family of the late IDF soldier Hadar Goldin are hoping they may soon be able to give their son a proper burial. Goldin was killed and abducted during the 2014 war with Hamas in the Strip. Hamas handed over what they claim to be the young soldier's remains to Israel earlier today. Those remains are still being identified. Our Lynn Plachmeyer has the story.
The body of hostage, believed to be Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, is being repatriated to Israel. Hamas officials had said the body was recovered on Saturday in an IDF-held area of Rafah. Givati Brigade fighter Goldin was killed and his body abducted during the 2014 war in Gaza, also known as Operation Protective Edge. At 9:05 a.m. on August 1, 2014, just over an hour after the start of a 72-hour humanitarian ceasefire in the war brokered by the UN and the US, Hamas gunmen emerged from a tunnel in the southeastern part of Rafah and attacked troops of the Givati Brigade's reconnaissance unit, killing 3 soldiers, including Goldin, whose body was dragged by the terror operatives back into their tunnel. IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir visited the parents of Goldin, Leah and Simcha, on Saturday to update them on the significant developments after 11 years in captivity. They said, quote, "An entire nation is waiting for Hadar to be returned to us. This is a mission that must and can be accomplished for all of us."
Sergeant Hadar Goldin was killed in an operation 11 years ago. His body was kidnapped by Hamas, which refused to return it during this period. Throughout this period, we made a great effort in the Israeli governments to return him, of course amid severe anguish on the part of his family, who will now be able to return him to an Israeli grave. We said at the beginning of the war that we would return all the abductees without exception. 255 were taken hostages, including 4 who were taken hostages earlier, and we have returned 250 to date. We will return them all.
On Saturday night, hostage families and protesters gathered in Tel Aviv once again to urge the return of the remaining deceased hostages. Among the speakers were the hostages released, as well as Ron Braslavsky, who just last week revealed a heartbreaking testimony about his sexual assault in captivity.
It is our duty to bring everyone back and never stop. And even if it takes another 20 years or 30 years, we will continue to fight for everyone. We will continue to reach every place, whether it's Lebanon, Syria, or Iran. We will not stop at any traffic light, neither red nor green. And we will continue with all our strength.
The bodies of 4 hostages remain held captive in the Gaza Strip.
And just in the last few moments, the Prime Minister's office has released a statement confirming that those were indeed the remains of the late soldier Hadar Goldin. So let's go down to the home now of the Goldin family. Our correspondent Balil Sladin is joining us now. So Balil, we've just learned that those were in fact the remains of the late soldier Hadar Goldin. They have now been handed back after more than 11 years in Gaza. This brings an end to a long and arduous campaign for the Goldin family, of course.
Yes, exactly. And let's talk about that, why we are witnessing here the family's friends. They are all here to support the family, of course, in this very difficult but very complex moment, let's say. And the people here are hugging each other and, of course, waiting for the statement that will be given by the family in an hour from now at 8 p.m. Israel time. So the identification process did complete, and the National Center for Forensic Medicine did say that the remains that were brought back to Israel now are official, that they belong to Hadar Goldin, that fell on August 1st, 2024. And this is important also because Hamas did not actually at any stage say that Hadar Goldin wasn't among the living, and Israel believed that they had the evidence that he was killed actually in 2014, and only his remains are being held in Gaza. And now the confirmation also from the Forensic Medicine Center in Israel. Now, this is, of course, a moment where the family needs to, of course, after all of this time, to get the time to perceive all of what is happening. But again, we're going to hear from them in an hour from now, their statement about the return of their son after all of these years in captivity.
And just give us a sense of how significant this is for the entire country today, Balir. Of course, the holding of Hadar Goldin's body over all these years prior to the October 7 attacks really has been a thorn in the consciousness of the Israeli people up until now, hasn't it?
Yes, definitely, because we're talking here about 11 years in captivity. The family itself did actually try for a long time to bring about the decision makers to seal a deal with Hamas to return the bodies of Hadar Goldin and also Oren Shaul, another soldier that fell in that battle, and his remains were actually brought back by Israeli forces during this war. But either way, they were saying that the only way to bring them back is only humanitarian, meaning that they wanted a diplomatic solution that Israel wouldn't actually release Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the bodies of their sons, the Shaul family and the Goldin family. That's what gave, at least, quote unquote, Netanyahu and the respective governments in Israel also some more time, maybe with less pressure than what we have seen during the time of this war, when the families of the hostages were actually demanding that a deal would be sealed at any price. Of course, we're in a different situation here. We're talking about killed soldiers, deceased hostages. We're not talking about living hostages. This is different. But also the ideological maybe stance of the families, the Goldin family and the Shaul family, made a difference. After all, Netanyahu right now is saying that they have tried to bring his bodies, the bodies of Oren Shaul and Hadar Goldin for a long time. The families maybe wouldn't agree with that statement 100%, but definitely, at least for now, with this deal, the body is returned to Israel.
Thank you very much, Balir Sledin, reporting there. So the Goldin family can now, after 11 years, finally give their son Hadar a proper burial here in Israel. Well, the timing of that handover may not be a coincidence. President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his senior advisor, Jared Kushner, are due to arrive in Israel tomorrow. They're expected to push for progress towards phase 2 of President Trump's ceasefire deal. And our correspondent and host, Nicole Zedek, is with me in the studio for more on that now. So, Nicole, what can we expect from Witkoff? Will this be about ramping up the pressure on Israel to move towards phase 2 of the deal?
Certainly, it seems to be the case. The fact that not only ramping up the pressure to move towards phase 2, but to make sure that everything is still going as much to plan as possible at this stage. According to the Trump administration, they continue to state there's going to be hiccups, there's going to be flare-ups in this ceasefire, but our main goal is to make sure it stays on track. And in order for it to stay on track, it actually needs to move forward, that being phase 2. And so that is likely the pressure we're expected to see. I can state, according to Barak Ravid, Jared Kushner has already landed in Israel this evening. No word on Witkoff, but as you mentioned, those meetings expected to take place tomorrow. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu even got a request to have his trial canceled tomorrow so he could have some of these diplomatic meetings. And truly, the big question still is Hamas disarming. That's what needs to happen in order to move forward with phase 2. Not only Hamas disarming, but also we had this full circle moment today that we just reported on. Hadar Goldin's deceased remains have finally been returned to Israel. However, 4 hostages are still in the Gaza Strip. That is phase 1. They need to be returned back in order to move forward with phase 2. And so that's the line that Israel is still stating. This pressure coming from the U.S. administration, it could try and put them forward. We're likely to see more of also the talks about who's going to reconstruct Gaza and some of the international financiers that are going to be needed in that, because that's what happens next. But still, in order for money to be put in order for Gaza to start rebuilding, Israel continues to say Hamas needs to lay down its weapons and it needs to disarm. Who's going to do that? That's still the big question right now, Laura.
Yeah, that is and always has been the elephant in the room, hasn't it? Who will take Hamas's guns away? But what about the plans for this international security force that President Trump says is integral to his plan? This is supposed to take over security in Gaza at some point. Israel very concerned about which countries will be allowed to participate in that.
Yeah, the big one tonight that they're stating absolutely not, that is Turkey. The spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister's office saying no Turkish boots will be on the ground. They've never been on the ground and they will never be on the ground in the future. And these are the two countries that Israel doesn't want to see, Turkey and Qatar. When it comes to any sort of an international stabilization force, they don't want to see them involved with a military presence inside Gaza. Now, the question then is who? The other countries that have been floated around, maybe Indonesia, maybe Azerbaijan, but still, when it comes to the role of this international stabilization force, the U.S. president says it's going to play a huge role in securing the future of Gaza, but still, we don't truly know what role that's going to take. Are they going to be the ones that are actually disarming Hamas? Or are they implementing more of a UN peacekeeping force type situation? Because that also depends on which countries would want to be involved. We heard just last week from Jordan stating, listen, when it comes to actually implementing and keeping the peace, we're fine with keeping the peace, but we're not fine with enforcing the peace, actually taking the weapons from Hamas. And it seems that's likely going to be the line that many of these other countries walk as well. But once again, as long as those countries are definitely not Turkey and Qatar, then maybe Israel can get more on board, but still a lot of hesitancy coming from Israel.
All right, we'll see what the American diplomats bring with them tomorrow. For now, Nicole, thank you very much. Well, Israel, meanwhile, continues to strike targets in southern Lebanon amid growing frustration with the failure to disarm Hezbollah. Israel has complained that the group has smuggled hundreds of rockets from Syria into Lebanon, restored missile launchers that were bombed by Israel, and have enlisted thousands of new recruits. But my next guest argues that this need not derail the prospects of peace between the Lebanese state and Israel. Right now, Lebanese law penalises any contact between Lebanese and Israeli citizens. Could that change? With me now, Haneen Gadar is a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and she's just published a report called A Roadmap for Israel-Lebanon Peace. Haneen, delighted to have you on the programme. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me again. Happy to be here.
Now, it looks as though, I mean, far from disarming and reaching a peace deal, Beirut is going to have to deal with another war between Israel and Hezbollah, because Israel has made it clear it will not tolerate Hezbollah rearming, let alone disarming, and posing a threat to it from the north.
Correct. This is what everybody is expecting. The messages are loud and clear with the threats and the fact that the Lebanese army had 1 year since the ceasefire was reached to disarm Hezbollah. We're still stuck in south of Lebanon, south of Litani, and the mission hasn't been accomplished yet. And we're hearing hesitation from the Lebanese side about total disarmament, sometimes calling it containment rather disarmament, and sometimes the army saying that they need the Israelis to stop attacking so they can do that. So this conditionality is not reassuring. So that's why we assume that there's one thing that the ceasefire agreement did not really address, and I think this is the main problem, is that's why we're here today, is that the ceasefire agreement that was reached last year did not really present a timeline or a deadline. The Lebanese government, the Lebanese army does not have this kind of ultimatum or pressure of a timeline to actually disarm Hezbollah. They can take all the time they need. The ceasefire agreement does not stipulate any deadline for disarmament. That's the problem. And that's why I think when we wrote this study, my colleagues and I, Ehud Yari and Robert Satloff, the idea was we're looking at another war. We're looking at escalation. We're looking at something that might lead to a new agreement, a new ceasefire agreement, but it's not going to be just a ceasefire. While we're looking at the security issues, while we're looking at the border security issues, the war prospects, the escalation that is happening inside Lebanon, it's very clear that the majority of the Lebanese do not want this. The majority of the Lebanese want Hezbollah to disarm, and they want peace. They want direct negotiations with Israel, and they want to really get to a point where they reach peace. And
when you say the majority, are you basing that on sectarian lines, or how do we know that? Is there polling to suggest that, or?
No, definitely not. Listen, I'm from the south of Lebanon. I know how, but we talk to people there. They're not going to say it publicly because it's dangerous to say it publicly. I think the Shia have more interest in peace than anyone else because it's not peace for them. It's not just, like normalization with Israel, and they don't see it as kind of like tourism back and forth to Israel. They see it as the only way to stop the war. And this is something that we really need now, because when you talk to a lot of to Shia in Lebanon, regular Shia, we're not talking about the opposition who actually are outspoken, just the regular Shia, they realize that the alternative that has been going on for 40 years, which is the resistance, worked for a while, but today it has failed. It died when Nasrallah was assassinated. So today, for the Shia, the war against Israel and resisting Israel is no longer an option because it failed, and they are dealing with the consequences every day. So for them, the end of war means one thing. It's like only peace can end war. Meanwhile, that basically the narrative on the street is very different from the pace of the government and the narrative that we see on the leadership level. And that's why we believe that talking about peace now, starting to talk about peace now, means that when we reach another ceasefire after a possible war or after a possible escalation, there will be more negotiations. And we're hoping that these negotiations go beyond ceasefire and really draw the line and make sure that peace is in the is on the agenda. Because we want it to be the final one.
And you argue that in your piece. You say that Lebanon could take some small steps right now, change some laws. For example, the law which criminalizes any contact between Lebanese and Israeli citizens. And that could actually move things forward rather than this endless wait for the government to disarm Hezbollah. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yes, these are certain things that the Lebanese, basically, if they do this, they can show initiative. This does not need negotiations. This does not need international interference and pressure. This is something that the Lebanese government can actually initiate and show goodwill if they really are serious about negotiations. If the president, the prime minister, whoever is talking about negotiations today, if they are really serious about negotiations, if they're really serious about ending Hezbollah's arms authority and ending this war and really getting somewhere else, this is a small step that would show good intentions, basically, and this really archaic law that doesn't make sense anymore, because we know that every Lebanese, most of the Lebanese who actually travel outside Lebanon have to be in communication with Israelis, whether they're working in Dubai or America or Europe. So this is something that needs to be eliminated. This is something that the diaspora wants more than anyone else, because this is only being used to target opponents and dissidents. This is not a real law. Once you establish this, once you eliminate the anti-normalization law, then people will be able to talk to people. And this is the ground, really, the basis, the foundation of any peace that is going to be genuine.
Right, that's how you get a genuine peace, isn't it? The people-to-people contact. Hanin, great to talk to you as always. Thank you so much. Hanin Gaddar there.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, Turkey issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and 36 other senior political and military figures over the weekend on charges of genocide in Gaza. The order to prosecute the warrants reportedly came directly from President Erdogan himself. They allege the IDF has been systematically targeting civilians and infrastructure in Gaza, blocking humanitarian aid and preventing access for medical assistance. For more on that, we can go to Istanbul. We're joined by journalist Ayla Jean Yakli. Good to have you on the programme, Ayla Jean. So, President Erdogan has been loudly accusing Israel of war crimes and crimes against humanity pretty much since day one of the war. Why are these warrants only being issued now?
It's a great question. We only have a statement from the Istanbul prosecutor's office that was made on Friday, and we haven't even seen the charge sheet. There's some thinking that the timing might be about damping down some of the dissent over the government's sort of stance on Israel. Despite Erdogan's tough rhetoric, a lot of Turks who are overwhelmingly opposed to Israel's actions in the Gaza conflict, they see things like trade. And most recently, we had the ambassador from the U.S., Tom Barak, saying that he envisioned that there'd be cooperation soon between Israel and Turkey. So it might be an attempt to sort of reinforce the idea that Turkey remains stalwart in its opposition to Israel.
Okay, it's an interesting timing, though, because we know that Turkey is trying to carve out a role for itself in Gaza, and Israel has said repeatedly, no way, that's not happening. No Turkey, no Qatar, no thank you in Gaza. So why would Erdogan kind of antagonize Israel even further at this stage?
Maybe they're taking the Israelis at their word. Maybe they see the fact that being part of the stabilization force is becoming less and less likely. There's opposition reportedly from Egypt as well. So, it might be an acknowledgement of that, or it might be an attempt to show that, Turkey can still, cause trouble, let's say. It's a good question about what kind of teeth this charge sheet could possibly have. Sovereign immunity should protect Prime Minister Netanyahu. And he has other international arrest warrants to worry about. So it seems largely symbolic, but perhaps it does send a clear message. And, is it something that Israel would be swayed by? It's hard to say.
And just there are reports as well that it's not just Israel that doesn't want Turkey involved in Gaza. You've also got Arab countries, particularly Egypt, who want to keep Turkey at arm's length. Do you think Erdogan is trying to use his relationship with President Trump to stay in there?
It would seem that the U.S. remains kind of the biggest supporter of this plan for Turkey to be a part of the force. Although we did have Trump's vice president, J.D. Vance, saying that obviously the U.S. isn't going to force anything on Israel. But, Turkey is probably hoping that its close relationship with the United States, that Trump and Erdogan's personal relationship can be persuasive on this count.
Ayla Jean, great to talk to you as always. Thank you so much. Ayla Jean Yakli there over in Istanbul.
Thanks, Laura.
Iran is facing an unprecedented water crisis. Authorities are warning that the reservoir which supplies the city of Mashhad has fallen to less than 3%. While President Pezeshkian warned over the weekend that if it doesn't rain soon, the entire city of Tehran, that's nearly 10 million people, would have to be evacuated. To talk more about that, let's bring in Kaveh Shahrouz. He's a lawyer and senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Great to see you, Kaveh. Thanks for being with us. So, this is a huge problem. That's an understatement. We're talking about 10% of Iran's reservoirs having run completely dry. How on earth did Iran find itself in this position?
Very good to be with you, Laura. Folks that have followed Iran closely have been warning about this for a very long time. This is yet another way that Iran's regime has, filled its own pockets with the public's money. It has refused to take care of its own people. So this environmental catastrophe, and it really is nothing short of a catastrophe, has been building for some time. This began as a result of the corruption of the IRGC's building arm. They are involved in the construction of dams, and they have been building dams in the wrong places, despite warnings from environmental scientists and environmental activists, because there is money to be made in it. And this has led to a crisis. This has led to wasteful water extraction. It's led to over extraction of water. There's ground sinking in various cities because the water underneath has been unduly extracted. There are activists out there that have been using a term for a while. They referred to it as the water mafia in Iran, a term that actually President Trump used in a recent speech. This water mafia has bled Iran dry, and now the Iranian citizens are paying for it.
Is the president serious when he speaks about evacuating the capital, evacuating Tehran, or is that just alarmist?
Look, if there was a serious government in place, they might potentially have to do this. Iran's capital is running out of water. This is as serious a crisis as you can have. But frankly, this regime in place, it wouldn't be able to evacuate 10 million people. It just doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have the organizational skills. But a serious government would have to give serious thought to evacuating a number of people from Tehran, perhaps not the full 10 million, but a major size of that population would have to be evacuated. There has been talk of potentially changing Iran's capital away from Tehran to deal with these crises, but I have no faith that Iran's regime, even if it was serious about doing this, would be able to pull it off.
Wow, it's astonishing. Just talk us through, how is this water shortage part of a broader trend of rapidly declining living standards for Iranians? We've talked about the weak currency in the past. We've talked about all sorts of shortages brought about by international sanctions. Is this just another nail in the coffin for life in Iran?
Absolutely. It's the culmination of all the mistakes and all the corruption that Iran's regime has been engaged in. So living standards have been plummeting because of the sanctions, because of the threat of war that constantly hangs over Iran. The currency is worth very little now. People have lost their spending power. The environment is in a state of disaster. Electricity is constantly being cut. So in the major cities, the pollution is such that city shuts down several days a year because people can't go outside and breathe. Oxygen is limited. Water is limited. Your money can't be used to buy goods anymore. And here's a regime that just doesn't care about its people, and they're beginning to experience the very worst of it.
Yeah, it's very sad. Just driving the country into the ground day by day. Kaveh, great to talk to you. Thank you so much. Kaveh Shahrouz there.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Well, time for a short break. When we come back, he once had a $10 million bounty on his head. Now he's playing basketball with US Army generals. Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa has arrived in the US ahead of his historic visit to the White House. We'll break that down for you after the break. Stay tuned.
You push it, you try to slide it, you even try to hold them shut, but your doors just won't stay closed no matter what. Introducing Ruby Monkey Magnets. Brand new ultra-thin magnetic plates that will keep your doors and drawers shut. And now may be your last chance to get them at a low price. Just peel to reveal the super strong adhesive. Place the monkey, then the magnet, and close. Installation is that simple, and now you have a door that will stay shut. So forget drawers that won't stay closed. Every drawer stays closed. It's so fast and so easy. Even large sliding doors or cordless window blinds. Everything stays closed with Monkey Magnets. The secret is the ultra-strong industrial magnet that's powerful attraction keeps your doors and drawers securely shut. These magnets are so strong they can hold this hammer that's nearly 5 pounds. Plus they're super thin. They'll fit just about anywhere, and they stay out of sight. Even screw them in for a more permanent solution. Monkey Magnets are perfect for cabinets, dresser drawers, sliding closet doors, accordion doors, and more. They're made of ultra-durable metal, so even your outdoor problems are solved in an instant because they're corrosion and rust resistant. Use them anywhere outside the house, even on that stubborn mailbox that won't stay shut. Monkey Magnets can stick anywhere, from drywall to all types of wood frames, metal surfaces, and more. Call or go online now to get 8 sets of Monkey Magnets for only $9.99. Monkey Magnets are guaranteed to last 10 years or your money back. But wait, due to rising costs and supply chain shortages, this may be your last chance to get Monkey Magnets at this low price. There is a strict limit of 1 full house pack per order while supplies last. So order now to keep all your doors and drawers shut tight with Monkey Magnets.
Call 1-800-749-6303. That's 1-800-749-6303. Call or visit getmonkeymagnets.com. So call 1-800-749-6303 now.
is a land of innovation, diversity, and dreams fulfilled. Od Yoter Tov is a remarkable primetime event that takes you on a journey to meet those who chose to make Aliyah and now keep Israel's heart beating. Professors, doctors, researchers, entrepreneurs, and families from across the globe. A major evening dedicated to celebrating success, integration, and the future of Israel. Od Yoter Tov, November 9th, only on I-24 News.
להתראות בוועידת המפרץ הבינלאומית לאזוריות בשנה הבאה. תודה רבה.
Welcome back. Syria's interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, has arrived in Washington ahead of his meeting with President Trump tomorrow. Al-Sharaa, a former al-Qaeda fighter who once had a $10 million bounty on his head, will be the first Syrian leader ever to visit the White House. Ahead of his trip, al-Sharaa's government announced it was carrying out raids against ISIS cells across the country. More in this report.
Ahmed al-Sharaa, the new president of Syria, has arrived in the U.S. for an unprecedented visit, which includes meeting with U.S. President at the White House. Over the weekend, U.S., Britain, as well as the UN Security Council officially lifted sanctions imposed on current Syrian president and former Islamist militant to ensure his visit takes place.
The result of the voting is as follows: 14 votes in favor, 0 votes against, 1 abstention.
There is a new Syrian government in place, led by President Ahmed al-Sharaa, that is working hard to fulfill its commitments on countering terrorism and narcotics, on eliminating any remnants of chemical weapons, and promoting regional security and stability.
The visit marks a turning point for Syria, while ISIS cells are being arrested in the Syrian region by al-Sharaa's forces. The expansions of the Abraham Accords, starting with security agreements with Israel, as well as the presence of the U.S. military by Damascus, are expected to be the focus of the meeting with Trump.
A lot of progress has been made with Syria. That's a tough one, but a lot of progress has been made. You know, we took the sanctions off at the request of Turkey, at the request of actually Israel.
His visit is certainly historic. It is perhaps the first visit by a Syrian president to the White House in over 70 or 80 years.
This visit, historic as it is, marks the giant leap that the new Syrian government is willing to make for and in the region.
So Ahmed al-Sharaa will be sitting down at the White House with President Trump tomorrow. Later this month, the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, will be going back to the White House for talks with Trump. Trump has made it clear he wants to announce a normalization deal between the kingdom and Israel. But according to reports, Riyadh has been doubling down on its conditions for peace. It says Israel must commit to a credible roadmap to Palestinian statehood, something that would be politically near impossible here in Israel at the moment. Nicole Zedek still with us to break that down. So, I mean, it's been a rocky few months, hasn't it? We had been hoping here in Israel that we would see some kind of, if not peace deal, then normalization agreements with both Syria and Saudi Arabia. But last Thursday, we all got a surprise when Kazakhstan entered the Abraham Accords.
Certainly not the country that anyone was expecting, Laura. I can tell you even on Thursday when there was this announcement that Steve Witkoff was set to announce another country is joining the Abraham Accords. At first, everyone took an excitement breath, and about an hour later, reports broke that it was going to be Kazakhstan, and everyone deflated a little bit. Now, this isn't to say that this is not good news. This is just to say it's a little bit confusing since Israel and Kazakhstan have had diplomatic ties for the past 30 years, since the early 1990s. So what is this really? It seems Israel might be less involved, and it is more about Washington and Kazakhstan. Basically, Washington, the Trump administration, truly trying to cement their presence in the Middle East, cement their alliances within the Middle East. And why Kazakhstan? That's still strengthening these American-Israel-Arab alliance against Iran. Now, why Kazakhstan? This is also important to note. Not only geographically is it right under Russia, and is it not so far from Iran, but also just the sheer size of this country as well as what's inside the country, resources. It has a lot of different resources that the United States could certainly benefit from. Even uranium, it's the world's largest exporter of uranium. So it certainly seems more about an economic advantage. That could be also what the Trump administration is trying to do, expanding these Abraham Accords. It's not just about building alliances with Israel, as we had seen with the previous countries that joined the Abraham Accords, but maybe talking about some new era of the Abraham Accords. People are also hoping, Laura, that maybe this gets the ball running. At least now the Abraham Accords are once again in the headlines as the Syrian president comes to the United States, as MBS is scheduled to come to the United States, kind of getting people to talk about it more so that could be a big topic during their meetings as well, even though it's not likely that will help any of these major headlines coming out of those meetings.
Yeah, it's being seen as a kind of a vote of confidence in Israel from a Muslim country, but yeah, not the deal that we were hoping for.
Certainly
perhaps.
not.
Nicole, thank you very much. Well, last week, Israel declared the border with Egypt a closed military zone because of weapons smuggling via drones from Egypt. Well, now Israel is looking at its eastern border amid fears of an invasion from Jordan. Military correspondent Yino Shalom has been speaking exclusively to the commander of the Jordan Valley Brigade, and here is his report.
עכשיו אנחנו כבר נמצאים בתא שטח של המובלעת, ובין הגדר לבין הנהר. מה שנמצא ומפריד בינינו כרגע לבין מדינת ירדן זה הנהר עצמו, נהר הירדן.
Lieutenant Colonel Gilad Shariki, commander of the Jordan Valley Brigade, brings us to the waterline outposts for the first time. Fighting trenches and bunkers established during the 1973 Yom Kippur War and abandoned nearly 30 years ago. Since June, the morning of the attack in Iran, IDF soldiers have been returning to man them again until further notice.
עד אזור שנות ה-90, סוף שנות ה-90, החזיקו פה לא מעט מוצבים ולאט לאט הלכו ופחות ייאשנו אותם. למה? הגבול הוא יחסית גבול שקט, לא יתגר אותנו. אבל מכאן הגיע 7 באוקטובר, ואני שואל את עצמי יום-יום, איך אני דואג שכאן בגזרה הזאת, זה לא רק שלא יהיה 7 באוקטובר, אלא שלא יהיה שום דבר שדומה לזה. ברוכים הבאים, הגענו למוצב ינשוף. הוא אחד ממוצבי קו המים שאנחנו מחזירים אותם לשימוש אחרי לא מעט שנים.
כולו תעלות.
כן, יש פה לא מעט תעלות לחימה. יש לך בעצם קו ראשון, קו הגנה מאוד מאוד חזק, שהוא מאפשר כאן שליטה בתצפית, באש, בכל מה שצריך. הוא מאפשר כאן גם כבר לשלוח כוחות, למנוע מאויב להיכנס בקו הזה. והמ"פ חי כאן. כשהמ"פ חי כאן, אז הוא מחזיק את המרחב, הוא מכיר את השטח, הוא נע פה בתוך המרחב. אנחנו נדרשים לעצור כאן מבריח, מסתנן, אבל נערכים למול מחבל או חוליית מחבלים, או גרוע מזה שיחדרו.
השאלה הראשונה של כל תושב שרואה שמסכלים כאן הברחה, גם של מסתננים, גם של אמל"ח, גם של סמים, הוא אומר, אוקיי, זה מה שראינו, מה עם מה שלא ראינו?
אנחנו בוחנים את עצמנו יום-יום. אנחנו מחזיקים כאן, כמו בעבר, גבול לכל דבר ועניין, עם יכולות טשטוש, באם חדרו אותנו, אנחנו יודעים להסתכל על זה. אנחנו יודעים להגיד, נחדרנו הלילה. אני מדבר כאן על הליכה רגלית. בעולם הרחפנים זה כבר משהו אחר, גם בזה אנחנו עוסקים לא מעט, וגם כאן אנחנו לאט לאט מתעצמים ביכולות למול איום הרוקה, ככה אנחנו קוראים לו, הרום הקרוב לקרקע, אבל חדירה רגלית, אני יודע לבחון את עצמי יום-יום.
But smugglers and security patrols are not the main focus here, rather what will happen on the day the order is given. The answer is not above ground, but deep beneath the surface. We can't show everything, but even on the way down, we discovered that until a few weeks ago, only bats staffed the outpost.
פה השמשנו חדרים נוספים, זה הכל לוחמים, כן? היה כאן מלוכלך בטירוף, חדר שאותו אנחנו מגדירים. הנה, הטלף חמודי.
יפה, אוי!
אבל את החדר הזה, אם אתה...
לא נפטרתם עד הסוף מהטלפים.
הנה, עדיין חלקם פה.
יואו, בוא תסתכל. 92. מהרביעי לעשירי עד הרביעי ל-11, 92.
כן.
מילואים דפוקים של חלבי סוליפן בכפר דלית אל כרמל. חלבי, אם אתה צופה, זוכרים אותך במוצב.
When they decided to leave the outposts, they left everything as it was.
מעמד מאוד מרגש היום, הקמת המוצב מחדש, משמישים פה גם את המוצב קו מים עצמו ואת התעלות.
After October the 7th, the IDF understood that an intelligence warning only will not suffice. The soldiers must be ready up to the last meter, prepared for every scenario, at least as much as possible.
אסור לנו לעזוב וללכת לאחורה למקומות שנוחים לנו יותר. שאיפה שהיינו עד עכשיו, במחנה, אנחנו צריכים להיות מוכנים להתקפה בהפתעה. בשביל זה צריך לחיות יום-יום בתודעה שהדבר הזה יכול להתממש פה, היום בלילה, מהגבול המזרחי, למרות שיש פה גבול של שלום, גם פה. זה כנראה המרחב הבא שהאיראנים ירצו לפעול בו, ואני מעריך שבשנים הקרובות אנחנו נפגוש פה יותר איומים.
The scenarios here are diverse, whether it's attacks directed by Iran, Houthis managing to establish themselves across the border, or the Palestinian villages in Jordan. Everything must be taken into account.
כאן חקלאי ישראלי, עשרות מטרים ממנו, כבר חקלאים ירדנים חיים האחד לצד השני, כשרק תעלת מים מפרידה ביניהם.
כן, יש כאן אתגר לא קטן בהקשר הזה. הצבא הירדני הוא לא האויב שלנו. האויב, אם תרצו, זה חוליות שיכולות להתבסס כאן על בסיס כפרי כביש 90, בין אם זה בהכוונה איראנית או אויב חותי כזה או אחר שיכול להתבסס כאן. גם למול המדינה שאנחנו נמצאים, אולי יש לא מעט פלסטינים. מה זה לא מעט? רוב המדינה היא פלסטינית. הלחימה בעזה מתסיסה גם אצלם כל מיני תחושות כאלה ואחרות, ואנחנו רואים את זה בדמות המפגע הבודד, ובדמות יכולת של חוליות כאלה ואחרות להתארגן כאן למולנו.
At the end of the day, Israel maintains contact with the partner, a code name for Jordan. The coordination is very good, Lieutenant Colonel Shriki says. But regarding the future, it will forever be a case of respect him and suspect him. But if we decided on a bridge, there will be a bridge, and it will be stable and secure.
הגשר שאתם רואים כאן, זה גשר שהוא כבר לא שמיש. מעל הירדן יש 4 גשרים שפוצצו בליל הגשרים, זה אחד מהם.
אנחנו יותר קרובים לפיצוץ גשר או לבניית גשר פה?
שאלה מצוינת. אני אגיד שאנחנו רוצים להחזיק כל נקודה שהיא גשר, להחזיק אותה בצורה איכותית וטובה. וזה מה שאנחנו עושים היום. במקום שיש גשר, אז יש שם הרבה מאוד כוחות, יש שם הרבה מאוד יכולות, גם מהצד שלנו וגם מהצד הירדני. אם החלטנו ששם יהיה גשר, אז החלטנו שאנחנו יודעים להחזיק אותו בצורה מספקת, כדי לאפשר שם ביטחון מקסימלי.
That report from Israel's eastern border. Well, as ties with traditional Western allies take a nosedive, Israel has been working quietly to strengthen relations with countries in Africa. This week, President Isaac Herzog will be visiting the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Zambia. It will be the first visit to the DRC by an Israeli leader, while the Foreign Minister, Gideon Sa'ar, opened an Israeli embassy in Zambia's capital, Lusaka, earlier this week. Well, to talk more about the potential and the growing partnership between Israel and Africa, I'm delighted to welcome to the studio Dumisani Washington. He's the founder and CEO of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel and the author of Zionism and the Black Church. Welcome to the program, Dumisani.
Thank you, Laura.
Great to meet you. Great to have you with us. So let's talk broadly, first of all. What are the opportunities for Israel and countries in Africa when it comes to a growing partnership?
They're limitless, right? And this goes back to the time of Golda Meir, the foreign minister throughout Africa during that time. And she's the creator of Mashav, as the Israelis would know. And even here now, these decades later, it's probably even more so in that Africa, there's so many things that are going on there. The difficult part is that there's a great deal of extremism, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, that's happening in different parts. But the positive thing is that you have a tremendous amount of growth. It is the youngest continent on the planet. 70% of African population, sub-Saharan, is 30 years and younger. And so there's an explosion that's actually, as a matter of fact, you have the two places in the world that have the most babies are Israel and Africa, right? So this is actually happening. And so you have a lot of young people there.
Optimistic people looking towards the future.
100%. I was just in Addis Ababa with some of our colleagues for a specific event there in Ethiopia. And my wife and I are walking around the town, and it's like a youth convention, right? It's like everybody's these young people everywhere, and you can see it there. So there's a lot of vibrance.
Which is the opposite of Europe, where it's kind of scary. You rarely see the prams, the babies, the strollers anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It was amazing to us, right? And so you're seeing that happen. So when you talk about Israel in terms of the resources that are there in Africa, the love, the relationship that has been the Africa-Israel relationship for all of this time, the sky's the limit. Netanyahu said 2 years ago that Africa's our top priority. We found that regardless to who's in power, even when I think Yair Lapid was prime minister for a short period of time a couple of years ago, he said almost the exact same thing. Africa's our priority. So that's always been Israel's priority, and Africa's as well.
So it's good to see the president going to these two countries later this week. Agriculture, it's kind of key to the relationship, isn't it, between Israel and Africa? Israel has a lot of agriculture tech. There's the water irrigation, of course, and seed programs and all the rest of it.
Right.
And of course, there are these exchange programs, and that brought young Joshua Molel to Israel from Tanzania. And tragically, he was brutally murdered by Hamas on October 7th. I just want to ask you, I mean, this was a young African man who was literally ripped to pieces on camera by Islamist terrorists. What has been the reaction, both in Africa and in the United States, to that?
There's been a doubling down. So what we saw as that was happening, as all the images were coming out from October the 7th, we have a lot of African colleagues, but particularly Sudan and Nigeria, they basically said to us, that happens to us every week, meaning when they saw what Hamas did, they're talking about Boko Haram and the Fulani herdsmen in Nigeria, or as you're in Sudan, whether it's the Janjaweed or whether you have now the RSF, these different fights and clash, there are millions of Africans being displaced and killed and tortured and all these things. So they understand what extremist violence is. So for them, it was a doubling down on their stance where Israel is concerned. There's a great deal of love that was being poured out. There's a great deal of understanding. And when they saw specifically that story about Josh Molel, and we shared it as did others, my son did a specific article on it, and not just the killing of that young man, but the celebration around it, and then the mutilate, all these horrific things. Many people, even those who were not in the Israel space or anything like that, we saw on social media, their response was, it was an eye-opening thing. For them, they saw Israel was always the problem. It was the aggressor. Israel. Yes, ma'am. So when they saw that, they took a step back and they went, wait a minute, this young Tanzanian boy, what does he have to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? And it caused a lot of controversy. It's still rippling right now.
Yeah, that's that was one of the most difficult images from that day. And just driving the love, I think, for Israel in parts of Africa, I wonder if you agree with this, is the Christian Zionist movement, the African Christian Zionist movement, of course, which is very strong in countries across Africa. At the same time, over in the United States, you've got people like Tucker Carlson, the hard right media personality, trying to kind of do something very strange, which is kind of sever Christianity from its roots in Judaism and of course from Judaism's roots in Israel. Just, I mean, how do you counter that? What do you make of that?
Laura, it's funny. I love the way you couched it, because everybody doesn't couch it that way. He's absolutely trying to do that. He's trying to sever support for Israel, which in the United States, just like in Africa, comes most strongly from Christian Zionists, right? Christians who do it by faith and in terms of practicality and everything. And so for Tucker, whatever his motivation is, that is what he is doing. And it's having an impact on those particularly who are unaware. In other words, if they're not aware of what he's doing, they'll just kind of take it, oh, yeah, well, he just said this. Because Tucker couches his things in a way that seems non-threatening, which is why he would platform a neo-Nazi like Nick Fuentes and give him softball questions and kind of let him rant on about, Jews and Israel, that type of thing. So I said this, I was one of the first ones, but I wasn't the only one. He's probably one of the most dangerous anti-Semites in the United States right now. And I want to be very, very clear. People hear me say this. I'm not about cancel culture. Let him say what he wants to say, right? This is not about that. I'm talking about the words that he's using and the way that he is very nefariously, consistently demeaning and demonizing Israel, Israel's prime minister, and then by virtue of connection, Jews, which is why you would bring on a neo-Nazi and not challenge any of his I love Stalin, I love Hitler type of thing. So it's very, very dangerous what Tucker's doing right now.
And of course, he's on the right, whereas on the left,
Yes,
just had the victory for Mamdani, of course, in New York City. And
Yes,
he plays the other way, doesn't he? He says that, you know,
Yes,
the Jews are part of the white oppressor class, and we, people of color, must all stick together. I mean, how do you interpret
It's amazing. So people are seeing it in live and real, like in stereo right now, but they're getting both sides of it, right? They're getting the right-wing Jews aren't part of us. They're dual loyalty, right? They're not really Americans. And then, of course, Mamdani, who was a star with his Students for Justice in Palestine membership there in college, and then the whole From the River to the Sea and Intifada. Absolutely. So for him, it is an oppressor class. Israel is a settler colonial state. He, like the rest on the left, will never address Hamas, never address the PLO, never address the Palestinian Authority, Islamic Jihad, none of those things, even when they're slaughtering their own people. As you know, shortly after the ceasefire, Hamas began killing its own people in the streets. No protests from people like Mamdani, Ilhan Omar, nothing, had nothing to say, proving they cared nothing about the Palestinian people. They only want to demonize Israel.
Yeah, it's a scary world at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Which is, and as you say, for Christians in Africa as well, there are terrible things happening there as well. Pastor Washington, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, staying with Africa, we're going to talk about Mali now, where an al-Qaeda affiliate has claimed responsibility for the kidnapping of 3 Egyptian citizens in the west of the country. Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimi is battling to take over the entire African nation and has put the capital Bamako under a months-long siege. Kidnapping foreign nationals has become another lucrative source of income for the group. Indians, Chinese and Iranians have all been taken hostage in recent weeks. Well, for more on that, we can go to Cairo. We're joined by journalist Joost Scheffers. So, Joost, first up, has there been any response to this kidnapping by the Egyptian government?
Yes, there has been a response. The Egyptian embassy in Mali directly responded, saying that they acknowledged what happened. They warned citizens to be cautious. A bit of like the standard reply that you'd expect from an embassy that happens after certain events like this. They provided some emergency hotlines for family and stuff. However, they did not make any statement about how they are going to bring these 3 Egyptian individuals, or among some businessmen, how they're going to bring them back. I've tried to look it up, but kidnappings of Egyptians are not that common. I mean, Egyptians are active all over Africa, especially in the field of business. But Egypt is not a rich country. As you said before, Jamaat Nusra al-Islam wa al-Muslimi, they have been kidnapping a lot of foreigners to like fight against the foreign presence there, or collaborators with the Russian occupation, as they call it. And allegedly they received 50 million for 2 Emirati businessmen. But yeah, Egypt is not a rich country, and Egypt doesn't have a history of giving payouts for kidnapped citizens.
And I wonder if this is getting much coverage, Joost, because Egypt has fought its own battles, of course, with al-Qaeda in the Sinai mainly.
Indeed, Egypt has been fighting a long battle here in Egypt in the northern Sinai desert near to Gaza. And yeah, thousands of police personnel, soldiers, police agents have been attacked. Police stations have been attacked. Checkpoints have been blown up by an Islamic State affiliate, Waliyat el-Sina. Now, in the recent years, together with some local Bedouin tribes, Egypt got the situation more under control there. But yeah, I mean, this gets wide coverage here in Egypt, especially that it also shows that Egypt is fighting against Islam, Islamic insurgents, that it doesn't want to have anything to do with extremists. So it also fills a bit the Egyptian perspective of like, we're doing the good thing to protect our country against such groups. So yeah, people are definitely hearing about it here in Egypt within the media, and the Egyptian government is allowing media to publish about it.
And what is Egypt's relationship with Mali? Because we've seen Egypt kind of dabbling a bit more in the sub-Saharan Africa region. We saw recently the president of Eritrea was in Cairo. That was seen as a kind of a message to Ethiopia, Eritrea's arch rival. Ethiopia, of course, Egypt, of course, very unhappy with Ethiopia building the new Grand Dam down there. Just talk us through, what is Egypt's business or its interests in the Sahel region?
Yeah, in general, Egypt is trying to increase its influence in the Sahel region and all over Africa, especially under the president of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in the recent years. However, Egypt is playing it both ways. As you said, they have the issues with the Grand Renaissance Dam from Ethiopia. They're trying to maintain a relationship with Eritrea, but at the same time, Egypt is having close relationships with Russia. Already since decades, there's an historical close agreement between the two countries. And in the recent years, Russia has been increasing its footstep in many African countries, especially in the Sahel, where this Islamic group is fighting about. So Egypt is still trying to play both ways, both the Russian side and both the African sides, with their relationships and with their influence. Because Egypt doesn't want to give up Russia. Egypt will never ever criticize Russia for the things that they're doing here in Africa, or try to turn a blind eye to it, or openly agree with it. But at the same time, Egypt also wants to have those relations with African countries at this moment.
Joost, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for that update. Joost Chef is there reporting from Cairo. Now to luxury caffeine in the United Arab Emirates now. A cafe in Dubai is serving what is being called the world's most expensive coffee, nearly $1,000 a cup. So what exactly makes it worth the price? I cannot imagine. This report takes a closer look.
It's the latest symbol of Dubai's taste for luxury, and this time it's in a cup. At Julith Cafe, a single brew costs $980, made with Nido 7 geisha beans, grown near a volcano in Panama, and auctioned for more than $500,000. Only 20 kilos of these beans exist, and Julith bought the entire lot, meaning this coffee can only be tasted here.
In the cup, you will find mostly white florals like jasmine, and citrus flavors like orange, mandarin, bergamot, and hints of stone fruits like apricot and peach. We are planning to serve 400 cups approximately.
Dubai already holds the record for the world's most expensive cup, but this one shatters it, attracting both coffee lovers and skeptics.
I was trying coffee every day, different beans, different texture, every day, but to spend that much on the coffee, it's difficult to say yes.
If I get the chance, I'll definitely try it. But honestly, $1,000 is very expensive. I love coffee, and that might be the only reason I'd pay that much for a cup. It's a very high price. But if the available quantity of this type is really limited, then I believe it's worth trying.
Inside the cafe, baristas prepare the brew like fine art. Each pour is documented, and every cup is certified for authenticity. Julith's founders say demand is already heating up, with collectors, Asian buyers, and even Dubai's royal family showing interest. And as long as there's a market for luxury experiences, even coffee may never taste the same again.
Stay with us. Our live coverage continues right after this.